They laughed first. Not on a battlefield, not under fire, but inside a closed Soviet briefing room. Confidence was thicker than cigarette smoke, and arrogance felt permanent. On the screen was America's new tank, the M1 Abrams, and to the men who had grown up inside steel holes, who worshipped simplicity and mass, it looked ridiculous. Too heavy. Too complex. Too thirsty. An aircraft engine in a tank. They mocked it. They underestimated it. And that laughter would one day echo across the desert just before everything went silent. This is the story of how the Soviet Union misunderstood the M1 Abrams, and how that mistake destroyed the myth of Soviet armored superiority forever. For decades, Soviet tank doctrine was brutally simple. Mass beats precision. Numbers beat technology. Quantity beats quality. The Red Army didn't plan to win by finesse. It planned to drown NATO in steel. Thousands of tanks, rolling forward day and night, accepting losses without hesitation. At the heart of this plan was the T-72. Low profile, cheap, easy to build, and easy to replace. An autoloader eliminated the need for a fourth crewman, meaning less space, less weight, and less cost. To the Soviets, crews were expendable, and tanks were just tools. And on paper, it all worked. Against older NATO tanks, the T-72 looked deadly. Its 125mm gun hit hard, its silhouette was small, and its numbers were overwhelming. The Soviets believed they had solved armored warfare. Then America showed them something completely different. When Soviet intelligence first got its hands on the XM-1 program, the reaction was almost insulting. A 60-ton tank, a gas turbine engine that drank fuel like a bomber. Electronics everywhere. To Soviet analysts, this was Western decadence on tracks. They saw weakness everywhere they looked. Too heavy for European mud. Too complex for real war. Too dependent on fuel. Too reliant on fragile computers. They compared it to the German Tiger of World War II. Powerful, yes, but impractical and doomed by logistics. Their conclusion was clear. The Abrams would never survive a real war, and certainly not against Soviet doctrine. So the reports were filed, the production lines kept moving, and the Red Army stayed confident. What they didn't realize was that they weren't just looking at a tank. They were looking at a system designed to kill first, every single time. The core difference came down to two philosophies, and one fatal gap. The Soviet Union built tanks for conscripts. The United States built tanks for professionals. That single difference changed absolutely everything. The Abrams wasn't designed to be cheap. It was designed to keep its crew alive, and that meant 3 revolutions the Soviets completely misunderstood. First was armor. They couldn't calculate. Soviet engineers believed in steel and explosives. Reactive armor, lightweight solutions. The Abrams used something they couldn't properly measure. Composite armor, layered ceramics, steel, and advanced materials that shattered penetrators instead of just absorbing them. On Soviet charts, the math simply didn't work, so they assumed it was a bluff. It wasn't. Abrams' crews sat inside armored shells that could survive hits no Soviet tanker ever expected a human to live through. Second was an engine they misjudged. Yes, the turbine burned fuel. And yes, it was loud at full power. But at idle, it was nearly silent. And when it moved like nothing the Soviets had ever faced. A 60-ton Abrams could accelerate faster than a T-72. It could fire, then instantly reverse back into cover. Shoot, move, disappear. Soviet tanks were built to advance. Abrams tanks were built to hunt. Third, and this was the fatal misunderstanding, was the eyes that changed everything. The Soviets believed electronics would fail in war. Mud, shock, dust day, were convinced simple optics were better. But the Abrams didn't rely on sight. It relied on heat. Thermal imaging turned darkness into daylight. It turned smoke into transparency. Sandstorms became nothing. Abrams crews could see Soviet tanks from kilometers away, while Soviet crews saw absolutely nothing. This wasn't just an upgrade. It was an extinctional level difference. The confrontation didn't happen in the fields of Germany as planned. It happened in the deserts of Iraq. Operation Desert Storm. The Iraqi Republican Guard used Soviet doctrine, Soviet training, and Soviet-built T-72 tanks. They were dug in, they were confident, and they believed the storm protected them. They were wrong. In blinding sandstorms, Abrams tanks advanced unseen. Their thermal sights lit up the desert like a map of glowing targets. T-72s appeared as white silhouettes, their engines still warm. Abrams gunners didn't guess. They didn't range their shots less than lock. Fire. They achieved first-round kills from distances Iraqi crews didn't believe were possible. Turrets flew. Ammunition detonated. Entire formations vanished before firing a single accurate shot. At the Battle of 73 Easting, a handful of Abrams destroyed an entire armored battalion in mere minutes. There were no losses, no close combat, and no chance for the other side. The laughter from Moscow finally died. The statistics from just 100 hours of ground combat tell the whole story. Over 2,000 Iraqi tanks were destroyed. Hundreds of those were T-72s. And how many Abrams were destroyed by enemy tanks? 0. Not one. The Soviet model of armored warfare didn't just fail. It collapsed. This wasn't about steel versus steel. It was about information versus ignorance. The Soviet Union believed mass could replace vision. They believed numbers could overcome awareness. They believed bravery could replace technology. The Abrams proved something terrifying. If you can see the enemy and they can't see you, the battle is already over. The Soviets copied weapons. They stole designs, and they matched hardware. But they never copied the ecosystem that created innovation. And that's why they laughed. And that's why they lost. The M1 Abrams didn't just defeat the T-72. It buried an entire philosophy of war. The laughter in that Soviet briefing room wasn't confidence. It was blindness, and history is unforgiving to those who stop asking new questions. If you enjoyed this deep dive into military history and the hidden truths of warfare, please like, share, and subscribe for more videos. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Because history isn't just about what happened, it's about what we learn. Thanks for watching.